Hey guys, Dan here, and this is Dan Does Disney. Tim is joining me over Zoom. Hello, Tim.
Hi, everybody.
This is going to be Davy Crockett and the River Pirates. We've talked before about Davy Crockett with, was it called King of the Wild Frontier?
That's correct.
Okay, so this one is the River Pirates, and this, like the other one, was taken from Disneyland episodes and made into a feature film. We had an episode on November 16th, 1955 called the Davy Crockett's Keelboat Race. And then just a month later, December 14th, 1955, Davy Crockett and the River Pirates. And so this was turned into a feature-length movie for the summer of 56. It came out in July of that year. And much like the last one, really, I don't have a ton of background information on this because it was essentially a TV show instead of a movie. And Disney, I don't know, didn't keep as great records, I guess, of just the Disneyland series as opposed to all of their big movie productions. I do know that it was filmed mostly in Illinois on location at Cave in Rock. But other than that, I don't really know too much. Did you find any information, Tim, on the background or the making of the film?
No, and I mean, I guess that does make sense because, like, when you talk about TV shows these days, they don't really tell you how much it costs to make a episode of television. Maybe you hear how much it costs, like an actor, like when it's like Friends or Big Bang Theory, you hear like they're making $1 million per episode or something like that, but you don't really hear how much it costs to make an episode of television.
Right. And yeah, like this year with the COVID restrictions and stuff, I read something like each episode costs an extra $30,000 to do all of the proper COVID procedures. But even when I read that, I was like, well, I don't know how much a normal episode of TV costs. So is that a lot? Is that a little? I have no clue. So, so yeah, this is just 2 episodes taken from the show. That's all we really have. But I will say, and we talked about this last time, we talked really a lot about the craze of Davy Crockett and the hats and all of that kind of stuff last time and what a big success it was. One of the other things we talked about that we can mention again is that Walt made sure that all of the Disneyland shows were filmed in color, even though color TVs for the most part didn't even exist yet. But that made it very easy for him to take these episodes and just stitch them together and put them on the big screen, because even though the shows were huge successes, nobody had seen Davy in color to that point.
Yeah, which was very smart of him.
Yeah, very brilliant. I mean, it basically cost nothing to make the movie because he already had the shows that he paid for. So it's just, a little bit of extra editing and there we go. So in that spirit, like I talked about last time, because I do have the Davy Crockett DVDs from the Walt Disney Treasures collection that basically is just all of the episodes of the Disneyland show. Last time, I think it would have been more beneficial to do a compare and contrast, because last movie was 3 episodes put into one movie. This is only 2 episodes put into an 81-minute movie, and each of the episodes really is only about 46 to 47 minutes. So there's not a ton that they really cut out. Now, what I did, Tim, was I pulled up Disney Plus on my laptop and put the DVD in my player, and I had them run simultaneously. And so anytime something was different, I would pause and say, okay, there's a minute-long scene here or whatever. So I do have a small list of a few things that they cut out. But because it's only 2 episodes turned into a movie instead of the 3, there's not a ton that's been cut out. Now, Tim, of course, you'll go over the synopsis of the movie, but really each half only has about 4 to 5 minutes taken out from it. So a lot of it is either like the segues from scene to scene. They would like trim a few seconds off to start the scene quicker, or they would just cut a few lines. It was actually a little bit like watching a TV show versus the syndicated cut of that TV show.
Okay.
where the 21-minute show gets put down to 19 minutes because they have to make room for commercials. Yeah. So I was kind of thinking of that. Each half does have one like several minute scene that gets cut out, but for the most part, most of the cuts are just like that.
Okay. So, Davy Crockett and the River Pirates.
So why don't you tell us all about? Yeah,
Yeah. So, Fess
tell us
Parker
about it.
and Buddy Epson are back playing Davy Crockett and George Russell as they compete against boastful Mike Fink, played by Jeff York, in a keelboat race to New Orleans. The stakes are high and things are stacked against them. For Mike Fink is the king of the river, and he will do anything to win. And thus cost Davy and Georgie all of their animal furs and pelts that they just got. And then later, Crockett and Russell ally themselves with Mike Fink as they battle a group of river pirates trying to pass themselves as Native Americans. And that's the plot of the whole movie, because those are the two episodes.
And before we go too far, for those of you that watch the other movie, you'll realize this is a prequel because, of course, he dies at the end of that other movie. So this takes place like years before the events of the Alamo and everything.
Yeah, I think it takes place before everything that happened in the first movie, is how I interpreted it. Like,
yes, I took that as well. I don't know how many like years that is or whatever, but yeah, years before I guess the original movie. And the reason they did that is because the character was so popular that Walt was like, well, we better, we got Fess Parker under contract here. Why don't we put him in more Davy Crockett movies? But Davy's dead, so what do we do? So they were like, okay, well, I guess we'll do, prequels. Because like we talked about before, like the Alamo happened, but a lot of the Davy Crockett lore is tall tale like.
Yeah, everything that happened in the first movie, him being in the Indian Creek War, him being a senator or congressman, and the Alamo, that all happened. But some of it was embellished because he's a larger than life character. And then I believe he did have a keelboat race, but the story was kind of more dramatized and more brought up as in folklore, making him kind of like a tall tale-ish. And Mike Fink himself is a real person, but he kind of was a tall tale type of character as well, kind of semi-legendary brawler and riverboat man, who like kind of exemplified the tough, hard-drinking man who ran the keelboat races on the Ohio and Mississippi rivers at the time. But
so that part was real.
Mike Fink is a real person, yes.
Okay, but he didn't run the keelboat races.
I mean, I don't know if he had a keelboat race with Davy Crockett or not, but he did. He was part of keelboats and stuff like that, but he kind of like was a larger than life character. But he doesn't like, he's not known to us like Davy Crockett is, because eventually people were like, well, he lacks the characteristics that make Davy. Like, he's a good guy and he does good things, where
man of his word.
Yeah, man of his word, good at hunting and things like that, where Mike Fink was like, he didn't really have admirable traits. He was boastful and mean and cheated and drank and fought, things like that, like
toxic masculinity, Tim.
Yeah, basically.
We would say today.
Yeah, he was kind of like, he was very like violent, and that doesn't really make for a good folk hero. Eventually people were like, well, okay, we're not gonna like make him out into a hero. And I read different tales of his death, but one did involve shooting beer mugs off of people's heads, and apparently,
Oh, okay. So that part was real.
well, apparently that was something that they did. But I mean,
Wow.
how much of it is true? But this story
Right.
was he did that. He shot low, killed someone, and then his buddy took revenge and shot him, or something like
Huh.
that.
Okay.
But
Well,
how?
at the beginning of the first Disneyland episode with the keelboat races. So you know how in the Disney Plus version we saw like the sort of magazines like laid out over the opening credits.
Yes.
So Walt basically in the introduction like held up these, he called them story almanacs, and he was like, you know, we have more stories for you from Davy Crockett from these story almanacs. And I looked up like what is a story almanac, and I couldn't find anything. I found like the Farmer's Almanac and a sports almanac and stuff. But so I calling it a story almanac, story to me means like untrue.
Yeah.
But of course, the almanac, like the Farmer's Almanac, is known for, you know, true predictions or whatever. So I really don't know how much of it is supposed to be embellished, you know, in the story or not.
Yeah, I mean, and that's hard to tell because Davy Crockett's history is some of it is story and some of it is
Right.
fact, and some of it is fiction, and that's
Right.
the problem with people like Davy Crockett, and then also Mike Fink. Like he's lesser known, but just reading about him, there was like two different stories about his death. I'm like, well, which one happened?
Right. Well, right, because we're talking about, you know, the early 1800s where it's like people didn't really keep great records, so a lot of stories were just passed on, you know, through the generations or whatever. And so yeah, we get sort of a more tall tale version of the people. But all right, so
Yeah,
you're
and
absolutely right. This is the two
we ran
stories.
like we ran into the same issue with like, and we saw it in the Rob Roy movie of how like his like his exploits became famous in London, and like some of those weren't true, and then later, like people telling his story of what happened when he was in London at the end, his buddies were telling the story completely different of what we just saw. Like so, that's
Right.
kind of like what happens with like these people and who get kind of famous in that era. It was like it's all word of
Yeah.
mouth, or he's just kind of
What
snowball.
it's funny. It kind of reminds me of, okay, so the new season of The Crown on Netflix. The royals are all up in arms, and oh, that's not what happened. This is, you know, a fictional version, whatever. But imagine if The Crown took place in the 1800s, and instead of being on TV, they just did plays about it. People would really think, because the records weren't great, that that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
So you have to think that, yeah, like probably a good bit of this is at least a bit embellished.
Yes. So the acting, Fess Parker, solid Davy Crockett as always.
Of course,
But
right?
I do think he had a little bit more range in this movie as Davy. There was a couple instances where he actually smiled and like made a joke or something. Like when he catches a bullet in his teeth, like he makes his face like he's like, oh, look at what I can
Yeah,
do.
real proud
Like
of himself.
yeah, he was very proud of himself. Like I felt like that level of emotion was not in the first one at all. Like
Right. No,
like
I would agree with that.
at one point he got very passionate in his speeches in Congress, but like in this movie he actually had some humor and stuff like that, which I thought added to his performance. Buddy Epson was he was good again, but I feel like his Georgie character was given less to do in this movie. Even though he was with Davy the whole time, I felt like he kind of took a backseat to Jeff York's Mike Fink character, because Mike Fink
Yeah.
basically steals this movie. He's a great villain that you hate at one point, and then when he teams up with him, you kind of are on his side again. Like he's very loud and he's great being a jerk when he needs to be a jerk. But he actually kind of has like a good bond with Davy at the end. So it's weird, but he really shines in this character.
Yeah, part two is almost a complete 180 for the character because you know, it's Dan Does Disney, so we assume people have watched the things by now if they're watching this, so we can talk spoilers. But at the end of that first half, the keelboat race, when Davy and Georgie actually win, Mike thinks like, well, you guys bested me, da 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 da. And then the second half, like you said, they sort of team up, and I wouldn't call them necessarily friends, maybe, but certainly he's, there's some sort of mutual respect, I think, there that isn't there in the first half because they're so hell bent on winning the race.
Yeah, I think as soon as he loses, he realizes, and the fact that Davy is not going to take the title of King of the River from him, he's like, no, you're still King of the River. Like, I feel like that kind of solidifies their friendship a little bit. Like, so, like,
certainly the respect.
Yeah, it's all about respect. And Mike thinks like, okay, I respect you now. You beat me in the keelboat race, but you're also not going to steal my title from you. And then he also eats his hat like he said he would. Like, so
and they give him gifts too. They give him that gun. They give him a new hat.
Yeah. So
yeah.
With
that, to go back to something you said even before the Mike Fink stuff, George also in this, I think, makes even stupider decisions than in the first movie. Like, he's the one who got them into the race in the first place. Like, he really is kind of bundling things up, whereas Mike Fink is trying to really help them out in especially that second half, though.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that he got drunk and then got him in the scenario of this race that David didn't want to be in the first place. So I think that's what they used as the thing, is that he actually, when he was drinking, he's like, I usually don't drink this much, but then Mike Fink pressured him into drinking more, and then then he's swinging from the chandelier. And that's one thing as well that I have written down here. There's a lot more comic relief in this movie than in the first one.
Definitely. The first one was a lot more action oriented.
There's a lot more. Well, there's some action
here, but not as much, I don't think. Right.
There's also the middle section, which was about Congress, which doesn't have any comic relief really in it. And
that's true. Or action.
Or action. And then the last one is the Alamo, which is obviously you're not going to throw in that many comic things in it. But
I guess that's true. Scenario wise, even though there are some stakes here, it is a lot more. Well, the first half certainly is a lot more playful, I guess. The second half, there's definitely some more intense action sequences, but nothing as serious as the Alamo or let's get into Congress and change the laws and all that sort of dry stuff.
Yeah. And I felt like this one was a little bit more cohesive as a movie, like putting the two episodes together, because they both took place on the river, which was nice. There wasn't much of a time gap between them. Like the other one spanned like 14 years and like all smushed together. This one is just like you have the keelboat race and then they're going back up the river and Mike Fink drops them off and you're like, okay, it's like a week later or a month later or something like that. And they also set up the river pirates in the first part of it that they're dealing with the second one. So I felt like this one, even though it definitely felt a little split of, hey, yes, this is the keelboat race and this is the pirates, they at least put that keelboat, the pirates in the keelboat race section to kind of make it a little cohesive.
Well, and okay, so that actually brings me to one of the things that they cut out. So I totally agree that because this is only 2 episodes split into a movie rather than 3, that it is definitely more cohesive. But in that first one, okay, so the intro, of course, is different because the show has Walt introducing it, and this movie has, just the start of the movie. But okay, so the first 15 minutes is the same, exactly the same, with a couple of lines cut out here and there. But there's a 4-minute or so scene after that part with an Indian attack that Mike Fink starts, that the Indians think Davy started, and they reference it a couple of times afterwards, but we actually see that whole exchange take place for about 3 or 4 minutes. And then we also see the part where Davy attaches their rope to Mike's boat that, you know, in the version now in the movie on Disney Plus, you actually see that he's connecting to Davy's boat and like, oh, what, you know, what's this rope, whatever. We actually see Davy and George like connecting that in the previous scene.
Okay.
In the TV version. So we got a little more background on the whole Indian attack thing that they make reference to in the movie version, but we actually see the whole thing. So that part made a little more sense seeing it in the original version.
Okay.
And then in the second part, there really isn't anything too much like that that's like plot changing. Like it's just kind of 1 minute here, 1 minute there. They do talk about how Mike Fink murdered somebody.
Oh.
That and they don't, obviously they don't say murdered, but they say that somebody was talking bad about Mike Fink, and so he whipped them, and that he locked him in a cage and sent him up the river. So that to me means he murdered a person. But yeah, so they cut that out for the movie. I don't know if that was to make it more family friendly or for time constraints or whatever, but that's in part 2 where Mike Fink is supposed to kind of be like, not a good guy necessarily, but a better guy, like we've talked about. So that could be one reason they cut that line out, but
maybe. So this was mostly shot. This was mostly shot on the river, which I appreciated. Except for there's a rapid scene which uses obviously green screen or blue screen. It looks okay for the time period. I definitely feel like I've seen worse, but this is a television show that was turned into a movie, so I think it was okay.
Here's what I think of, though, Tim. I feel like, yes, that is all true. But after the success of the first movie, you have to figure Walt made these productions for the show with the movie in mind. So he probably spent a little more on that than he did on some of his other shows, I would imagine. So I do agree. For a TV show, it looks fine. But I think keeping in mind that he probably had it earmarked for a movie, it does look a little bit corny.
Yeah, but I mean, would you think? Can you think of any other movies in 1956 that would have similar scenes to that, like that would have kind of green screen? Because I mean, like anytime that like someone's driving a car or something like that, they would have those stupid green.
It looked really bad.
Yeah. So I mean, like
that's true. It looked better than that.
Even in movies in this time period, you would have that crappy green screen, and everybody just kind of accepts it.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But you're right. That was really the only scene where they did that, because everything else was pretty much live on location.
Yeah, and I kind of tip my hat to them for doing that. Where like I would think if they were making kind of like other TV shows, they would use more green screen than they actually did in this one.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I feel like he definitely put more of a budget into these, knowing in the back of his mind like these will be put together for a movie eventually.
Yeah, because I felt like there was a lot of filming on the river, which I don't think they would have done for any other TV show in this era.
Yeah, that's true. And so speaking of river, the one other scene in part 2 that I think is mildly interesting that they cut out is it's a night scene, which I do think the night shots even are lit pretty well, and they do a pretty good job, you know, telling us it's night, but we're still able to see things. But when they meet up with Mike Fink in that second half, at first he shoots at them thinking that they're Indians. And there's like a 2-minute scene of him using the gun that they bought him on them, thinking, you know, they're Indians. He shoots a hole in their boat and everything. In the movie, that gets all cut out, and they basically go from, hey, let's see if Mike Fink's around, to next scene, they're on Mike Fink's boat saying like, hey, buddy, you know, what's up? We need your help. But yeah, there's a whole scene where he actually tries to kill them, not knowing that they're them.
I would say that the animal footage in this movie, there's not much, but there's some shots of crocodiles and alligators, is better than the first Davy Crockett, but not as good as the nature documentary still. But
oh yes, yeah, for sure. Like the squirrel at the beginning was okay, like the one that was throwing acorns at Georgie.
Oh yeah,
all right.
And the skunk was good, but it was because that skunk was out there. But it was kind of like the far shots of the alligator, which they did that the same thing in the first one, where like, oh, here's an alligator underwater coming from Davy Crockett, but it looked so bad in that one. This one was like the footage was like slightly worse than what it was, and it kind of fit a little bit better.
Yeah.
The only other thing I've written down here is that the fighting in this one I thought was better than the first one as well. There isn't much action in this one. It all kind of is in the last like 15 to 20 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, the race is actiony at sometimes, but it's not much fighting. I mean, there's a little bit of the pirates, but even like the final
one, you could say the same. Like, yeah, like there's a little bit of fighting in the bar, but it's more like Macho Man contests as opposed to like actual like brawls.
Yeah, and so this one ends with a fight between them and the river pirates, and I felt like that was a lot more choreographed than the first one. The first movie, like, there was a little bit choreographed, and then all of a sudden it would be just like Davy Crockett and whoever he was fighting, like just like rolling on the ground and wrestling. But this one, there was a lot more to it. There was like setups. There was people hiding underneath tables. I felt like there was a lot more planned out in this one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, you really have to think, that Walt probably took care of the things that were kind of not great about the first movie, and probably that is why he decided to make it 2 episodes instead of 3, because he probably realized, like, well, it made money as a movie, but like the story was kind of all over the place because we had to cut out so much. They must have cut out a good 20 to 30 minutes from that first movie, and here they only cut out 8 or 9. And really, I'm not sure why, because it's only an 81-minute movie. They could have put both entire shows in this, and it would have only been about 10 minutes longer. I don't know why they did it that way.
I don't know. Maybe they felt like the things that they cut out made it less, like, more family friendly, like you were saying.
Yeah, and that definitely could be part of it, with between the Indian fights and the the murder talk and all that kind of stuff. I guess that's true. Yeah. But yeah, either way, I mean, I think it could have worked, if they kept everything in there. But I doubt you felt like you were lost watching it.
No, I didn't think I was lost at all.
Yeah. So whereas in the first one, I feel like since we didn't watch the shows, either one of us, we were like, it's definitely a little disjointed.
It was disjointed, but I don't think I was lost at any point. I feel like that's why they had the Davy Crockett song so much in the first movies, because they were giving us stuff that they cut out. This one, you had the Davy Crockett song in the beginning, and that was it. And then you had the Mike Fink song, like shortly after that, just introducing Mike Fink as we kind of learned about him. And then they sang the Mike Fink song once more time on the boat of Mike Fink's crew, and then they sang the Davy Crockett song on the crew as themselves as well. So it wasn't like, here's 20 minutes, Davy Crockett song. Here's another 20 minutes,
right,
Davy Crockett song. So I don't think I was lost in the first one, but they definitely overused that Davy Crockett song, where this one, I don't think they ever used it at all.
You're right. I forgot about how much they used it. You just said in your example 20 minutes. It was like every 6 minutes they probably ran damn Davy Crockett song into the ground. You're right. This one, they used it, yeah, like, I think they used it an extra maybe 1 or 2 times in the TV version. But yeah, and then we had that song at towards the end with that dude with his guitar on their boat about the golden yellow hair.
Yeah, which it wasn't a good song, but it was part of the plot of
right
giving messages to people on the crew on the shore.
Horrible song though. I agree.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess they probably only used the Davy Crockett song, yeah, once or twice, and then I guess over the end again. But yeah, most of it was way more balanced than every 6 minutes. But you're probably right. That is what they did to advance the plot of the other movie.
Yeah, and I thought the Mike Fink song was good as well. I thought it was just as catchy as the Davy Crockett song.
King of the River.
King of the River. There's a hurricane brewing or something like that.
Yeah. Look, I am looking forward to seeing this actor again because he appears in a couple of other Disney things. You said his name was Jeff York.
He was in the Great Locomotive Chase. He played Campbell.
Oh my God, you're right. Now that didn't even occur to me. I just saw that he was coming up in a couple of the ones we're going to watch next. Johnny Tremaine and Old Yeller he plays in.
Yeah.
Which Fess Parker is in Johnny Tremaine. I don't know if he's in Old Yeller or not. I think he might be though. So they may team up with both of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that makes sense because I really liked this Mike Fink dude. I mean, as a character, he kind of isn't the best, but I liked the actor a lot that was playing him.
Yeah, and I thought it was a little similar to his Campbell character of kind of being like kind of like the grumpy type of guy that always wants to fight, but he was so much over the top in this one, which like was kind of what he was supposed to be.
Right. Yeah, I feel like Great Locomotive Chase, first of all, I think historically it's probably a lot more accurate than any of the Davy Crockett stuff. Maybe not the Alamo scene, but yeah, I mean, and we talked about this during Great Locomotive Chase, how good of an actor that dude was. And here he's just designed because Davy Crockett is so good. And so, you know, all the adjectives you said at the top of the show here, that he really did need this really like hard-headed jerk foil. And the guy in the second half even calls him a jackass, you know, which, I mean, really, like you say, that's basically what he's designed to be. And I thought he was great. You kind of do really hate him in that first half.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I mean, that's all there really is to say, I suppose. But we'll have to grade it. I think, I don't know. I was going into this unsure. I knew I enjoyed watching this better than the first one, but I wasn't sure if it was a better made movie or not. And based on everything we've talked about, I feel like you've talked me into that this is also a better made movie than the other one.
Yeah, but I forget what I even gave the first one.
I was gonna look that up today, and I forgot to. I think it was like a B plus or an A minus, something in that range, maybe.
No, there's no way I gave it.
Is that way too high?
I probably gave it a B.
Okay, we probably gave it a B.
And I think I'm going to give this one a B plus.
Actually, you're right, because the last few, I don't think we've given. I mean, we gave like an okay grade to the Locomotive Chase. The Littlest Outlaw, we
gave B minus.
Littlest Outlaw was like a C or a C minus, wasn't it?
It was a C minus, yeah.
Yeah, and I feel like the first Davy was somewhere along the lines of the Great Locomotive Chase.
Probably like B minus, somewhere around there.
Yeah. Maybe. Okay. So you would give this a B plus, huh?
I think so.
That sounds about right. I can get behind that. I was feeling like a B or a B plus.
Yeah.
For this, I do agree. It's certainly more entertaining than the first one.
It's a little bit more entertaining. And I think if if Jeff York wasn't doing a great performance in this movie, I think it would be a B. But his character, his acting is to the point where you dislike him so much in the first one, yet somehow he turns it around that you're kind of like on his side in the second one, and you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I can see how Davy and them kind of made amends, and like you're like, okay, yeah, of course, go get Mike Fink's help. Like, why are we not getting Mike Fink's help? Like,
yeah, it all did make sense, didn't it? In the first half, he reminded me a lot of Bluto from the old Popeye cartoons.
he reminded me of Pete from the Goofy cartoons.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, just like a big oaf of a person who's just mean to be mean, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you're right. Somehow, and that because I think he's so gracious in his defeat after the first one and so stunned that they aren't gonna take his title from him and everything. That he becomes a little more humble, but only to them, because then when they go to that bar, like, and he's in the disguise of the banker, the guy's like, oh, that Mike Fink, have you heard of him? What a jerk, whatever. He gets real angry. So I think it's like losing the race humbled him, but really only to Davy and George, I feel like.
Probably.
But that's okay, I guess. I mean, knowing what we know about this character, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So, all right, I can get with the B plus, I guess, for Davy Crockett and the River Pirates. I think typically the more disliked of the two films, I feel like. I read a few reviews of it. There's a couple people online that once Disney Plus went up also started going through like all the movies they have on there, and the pair. There's a guy and a girl that do it together. I don't know if they're married or what their deal is, but they both like hated this movie, and I was like, I didn't feel that way at all. Like I really kind of liked it.
Well, I could see that is because, I mean, Davy Crockett had it was such a craze that oh my God, like
big craze.
It was a big craze. I could see like if you were a big Davy Crockett fan, expecting like something like the Alamo or something like that, and you're like, oh, I get a keelboat race and some river pirates instead.
Yeah,
like,
I guess that's
like
true.
The stakes of this movie are not nearly as high as in the first one. Like you have Davy.
No, this is definitely more. This is like more adventure for sure.
Yeah,
and that was more, like literally life and death, obviously.
Yeah. The first one, you have him kind of ending a war between the Native Americans,
right,
and the people at the time, and then he goes to Congress and he's like defending Native American rights, and you're like, oh, and like people are like trying to get Davy to get out of town so they can like get bills passed, and then he goes to the Alamo. Like those are some pretty high stakes. This one, Davy's just having fun, so I could see like
yeah, that's true.
It's definitely a step down on like the seriousness of it, but I think that kind of makes it more fun. I feel like this movie is more fun.
It's definitely more fun. I don't even think there's any disputing that. I mean, especially like that Congress scene was just so boring.
Yeah,
compared to everything else. So, all right. Well, so up next we have Secrets of Life. That is the Disney nature true life movie that's coming up, and then after that we have Westward Ho the Wagons, which does Fess Parker is in it.
Fess Parker's in it.
Oh, Jeff York is in it too. He's third build. So okay. Jeff York again, Westward Ho the Dragon, or the Dragons, Westward Ho the Wagons. I feel like Dragons might be more interesting, but I guess of course we have to stick with
the last 2 weeks. And
I know, because I don't know why. It must be Westward Ho the Wagons. Maybe it's just hard to say. I don't know. And I want it to be the Dragons, Tim. I really want there to be a lot, but we probably don't get that until Pete's Dragon in the 70s, I guess.
Yeah.
But all right, so Jeff York will be a part of that one as well, so that'll be good. All right, well, Tim, thank you for joining us again, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everybody.